Hi there guys, it's Authentic here. Today we're going to be talking about the Shadowkin faction, the faction group that's going to be opening up. I know a lot of people are worried about they not being able to get the Lydia in time, or they won't be able to clear the Shadowkin faction. So I personally think there is a way that you can get this done. The champions are really strong, they're fantastic champions in the Shadowkin faction. So let's go and take a look at these legendaries and epics. So we're going to start with the legendaries. We're going to talk about maybe 2 or 3 legendaries that I think will be really good. To start us off, I would say Lady Kimmy is probably the best legendary for any PvE kind of content from her whole faction. Her A2 is decrease speed, decrease accuracy on a 3-turn cooldown for 2 turns, and decrease turn meter, and she has additional turn meter reduction on the passive too. If you do land these debuffs, their speed's going to be decreased, so they'll be taking less turns. And when they do try to debuff you, because of the decreased accuracy, you're hardly ever going to be seeing any debuffs. So she's fantastic for waves, and for bosses she's going to be incredible. So the A1 is turn meter reduction. It's 50% chance or a 60% chance if you have it booked to reduce turn meter, and it only reduces turn meter on the second hit. So it is a lot weaker than it might sound initially. It's not double hit turn meter reduction, it just reduces turn meter on the second hit. However, it is 2 hits, so you know, it is something there, but it's not the strongest of A1. For as long as it goes on for, it might sound better than it actually is. It really isn't that powerful for A1. Her A2 we've gone over, and her A3 is probably the best ability in her kit. Maybe A2, A3 is close, but I would generally say that the A3 is just the stronger ability. So what does it do? It's a 4-turn cooldown when booked, removes 1 random buff from each enemy, has a 75% chance of placing a block buffs for 2 turns who have buffs removed. So she has to remove a buff to land block buffs. So it's not always, it is situational block buffs, but it's still there. But the second part of the ability is what's really good. Fills the turn meter for all allies by 15%, 50% increased accuracy, and 30% increased speed buff on all allies for 2 turns. This is incredibly strong. Increased speed and increased accuracy means if you have any champions that you've got built-in damage and you didn't put accuracy on them, she would just make it so that increased accuracy check would get them closer to landing their debuffs. So you can build your whole team around this champion. You can build the resistance of your whole team to make sure you have enough resistance with decreased accuracy on your enemies, and have enough accuracy that when you have increased accuracy that you land debuffs. Make her your fastest champion, and she will be a super hard carry. Lady Kimmy's passive is probably one of the most unique and strong passives in the game. So it reads, whenever this champion places a debuff on an enemy, also decreases that enemy's turn meter by 5% for each debuff placed. So when she lands a decreased speed and decreased accuracy, she's also landing a 10% reduced turn meter on them, which is really strong. And also, whenever this champion or an ally receives a debuff, fills their turn meter by 5% for each debuff received. Now, every time you get debuffed, basically she fills the turn meter for all of her allies who had debuffs placed on them, and increases the turn meter by 5%. This works in Hydra too against the Head of Torment. So if you're getting feared by Head of Torment and you're running Inquisitor, so she's really great for that too. So she's meta for Hydra. She's really strong in Hydra, and then also if you're thinking about building her for faction wars, she's fantastic. The second best champion I would say is Riho. Now the reason why I said Lady Kimmy is stronger than Riho is because Riho is more of a support, backup, more of a reaction champion than she is proactive. She's more of a reactive champion is what I'm trying to say. She cleanses, heals up, and does a CC on a single target. So she is really good, but in my opinion, Kimmy is stronger for faction guardians. Rio is better for everywhere else in the game, I would say. For a Platinum Arena, she's much stronger than Kimmy. But for this, I would say Kimmy is stronger. But with her, you get the A1. Her A1 is stronger than Kimmy's. Her A1 continuous heal on the lowest ally, also has a 7.5%. Also places a 7.5% continuous heal buff on all allies with 30% HP or less for 1 turn. This is fantastic. If you do survive with low HP, she then basically AoE heals you on her A1, which is really strong. Her A2 is a 3-turn cooldown when booked, 100% chance to land stun, HP burn, decrease defense, weaken, decrease attack, and decrease crit rate. So fantastic. The damage on this is pretty good too. She can hit pretty hard with this. So this ability is really good, single target stunning. Will be really good for a boss for decreased attack and crit rate. Weaken, decrease defense and burn, all really good debuffs for a boss or just general waves. The A3 is a cleanse and probably one of her best abilities, I would say. This has to be the best ability, pairing it with her passive. Removes all debuffs from all allies, places a block debuffs for 2 turns, also heals 35% of their max HP, which then increases with books. So it's a massive heal, it's a great cleanse, and she heals further 5% for each debuff removed from them. So it can scale up with debuffs and also with books. A 3-turn cooldown, AoE, block buffs and cleanse. It's probably the best cleanse in the game. Her passive is incredible. Her passive is really good. Whenever she gets debuffed, she instantly transfers them from this champion to the attacker. So if anybody's landing a stun or a fear or a decreased attack, any debuff, she will bounce it back and the passive will go on a 3-turn cooldown. So in Platinum this is really good because if a hegemon debuffs you, you can just throw the debuffs back and cleanse your team and you're good to go. So she's a fantastic choice too. The third and fourth, or the third, I would have to say it's a toss-up between Kyoku and Genshin. Kyoku is good for a hard carry for a support. She does have the A1 where she places the weaken. There's a chance of landing the weaken. Her A2 is fantastic for waves, decrease attack, AoE. The burn is a bit situational. I wouldn't rely on the burn, but the decrease attack is great. And her A3 is maybe the best ally protection ability in the game. I don't know, you let me know. I think it is the best ally protection in the game. With a block damage for 3 turns, gets an extra turn ally protection for 2 turns. This is really strong. It is a 4-turn cooldown, but this is probably the best ally protection in the game. Maybe you might say Krisk's ally protection is up there too, but she's a close second, I would say, to Krisk. And her passive is, I used to think this is more like Seeker's passive, but it is much stronger than Seeker's passive. Every time this champion is hit with a critical hit, heals all allies by 15% of their max HP and then places a 60% increased defense on all allies for 2 turns. Defense in all battles is just a great aura. And maybe Genshin for the people who are going to have stronger rosters. If your roster is strong enough that you need DPS, this guy's probably the best DPS for legendaries, I'd say. The AoE decreased defense, we haven't seen this ability in any champion just yet. I know Jintoro has its single target, but the AoE decreased defense is just the best way to get through waves. If you have some really strong support, you can just use Genshin to clear your waves for you. He's fantastic. The A1 attacks one enemy 3 times. Each hit fills this champion's turn meter by 6%. That's pretty good. That's 18% turn meter on the A1. Decreased defense, AoE, 3-turn cooldown, 100%. Each critical hit fills this champion's turn meter by 10%. This could be 50% turn meter increase with AoE decreased defense. That's incredibly strong. For 5 champions on enemy team, if he crits every single one of them, back up to 50%, he's going to be amazing. For anybody who's trying to speedrun. I don't have one, I would love one. I would love a Genshin for Faction Wars, but unfortunately I don't have him just yet. His A3 attacks one enemy, will ignore unkillable and shield buffs. Okay. Fills this champion's turn meter by 30%. Fills this champion's turn meter by 60% if the target has 50% or less after this attack. Also decreases the cooldown of Steel Parting and Fated Vengeance skills by 1 turn if this attack kills an enemy. It's a really strong A3. The cooldown being reduced is nice. The turn meter fill is also really nice. So the more damage he does, the better the skill gets, which works really good for an attack based champion. His passive increases his champion's speed by 10% and resistance by 50% if the number of champions on this champion's team is equal to or lower than the number of enemies on the enemy team. That's very interesting. It's very interesting. The fact that you get these buffs, the only way you could reliably do this if you had a giga chat account and you wanted to run through Faction Wars with 4 champions. If I had Shadowkin, I would probably try it. I would probably try to put Genshin in and just 4 or 3 other champions, just to make sure we always have less champions to start with, and just let Genshin just take care of everything. Just put Riho around him, put Lady Kimmy on him, and just give him one more support and just put him in there. I think that would be interesting, but you know, Maybe it's a fun idea. So those are my 4 legendary champions. I'd say Lady Kimmy number 1, the best one for me. Riho strong second. Kyoko I'd say third, but only if you don't have one of these two. And if you have a really strong roster, then you can go with Genshin. I think he would probably be the best DPS in this faction. Now let's take a look at the epics. The epics, what everybody's going to be interested in. These champions are more accessible, and there's some really strong options in here too. Okay, so moving on to the epics, I would generally say when it comes to the epics, it's pretty close for the number 1 and 2 slots. There are some really good strong epics, but the one that I've gone with to be the best of the rest from the epics is gonna have to be Hotatsu. Hotatsu is probably the weirdest looking champion I've ever seen. It's just really unpleasant to look at. I don't know what they were thinking. I mean, all of the Shadowkins do look really cool, but this guy is, I don't know, what is he, supposed to be a tree? A guy who turns into a tree? I don't know what they did with it. Anyway, his kit is the most interesting and the strongest support in the epics, I personally do think. The leech on the A1 is good against bosses. Once you land the leech, you know, your team just starts healing themselves up. The AoE decrease attack is also fantastic. Attacks all enemies has a 50% chance of landing a decrease attack, 50% decrease attack. It goes up to 30, so 80%. You could go 85% with sniper. You have the increased defense and continuous heal too, so which is really strong. Removes one random debuff from this champion at the start of their turn. Will remove. Okay, so it has a priority to remove stun, sleep, freeze, fear, true fear, provoke, and petrification debuffs before other debuffs. That's really interesting, the fact that they prioritize that. And his aura's strong too with the defense aura. I generally do think he's really solid. His increased defense into his AoE can do some damage too, so I generally do think he's the best support in my opinion. I do know Masamoto is also a decreased defense champion. He has a 75% chance to his 80%, and he has a turn meter fill instead of the healing, so you could probably go with either one. I personally do like Hotatsu more than Masamoto, but this guy is good too for the same reason. So I would say one of these two, having an AoE decrease attack is going to be huge, making sure you don't get hit too hard. And then after that, I would have to go with Borangiri over Toragi. Even though Toragi is incredible support, because all 3 of these champions kind of fill the same role. If you do have the decrease attack, then I would say after that you probably want the stun. The 60% chance of doing an AoE 3-turn cooldown stun is fantastic. It's brilliant. It's almost like Syle's stun, but maybe I'd say his is a little bit stronger. But it's a fantastic skill. The AoE stun for 60% chance on a 3-turn cooldown is great. He also has strengthen and shielding that he can do on his team, 4-turn cooldown. This is a little bit weaker than I would say Toragi's skill because it's a conditional shield. And the A1 has provoke, and the passive heals whenever an ally or an enemy dies. This is pretty good. This is really good. When anybody on your team kills somebody, then you can always have this guy healing up. If he had more AoEs, I would probably make a case for a stun set or a provoke set for him, but we don't seem to have more than just one AoE. So I'd say Borangiri, and then Toragi. I would say if you don't have one of those two, or if you still need more support, then Toragi is your guy. The provoke AoE provokes fantastic. Chance increases for each debuff on enemy team, so that's really good. His A1 does decrease attack, so that's also really good. 40% chance for the decrease attack. But Hotatsu gives you AoE. And this ability, the ally protection, the shield and the reflect damage and the self-healing is really good too. I just find ally protection, I do find it to be really strong, but I feel like it's a slower way to deal with things. If you do find that you need more support, then ally protection is strong. But increased defense I generally think gets the job done for waves. Depends what kind of difficulty level they bring out the faction wars. If it's the same as what we've got in the game now, it shouldn't be needed. Ally protection shouldn't be that much important, but if you need it, you can always take it. It's a 3-turn cooldown, so it's fantastic. Poisons on the passive, every time he's hit, he lands a 5% poison for 2 turns. So for the boss, that can be really good, and his aura works too. So that's what I would say for support. Borangiri, Hotatsu, and Toragi, and Masamoto's also all really good support. If you don't have Genzin like me, your best options for DPS are probably Oboro and Sashi. Oboro with the AoE decreased defense on the A1 as long as you have enough debuffs. She can be fantastic, although it's on the A1, so she's going to want to do other abilities before she does that. And then Sashi for the increased attack and turn me to feel and the single target hit too. So Sashi's also going to be a really good DPS champion in my opinion. She is AoE, so you could probably build her more for stuns too, increase attack and turn me to feel and stunning. But that would be a way to get it done if you needed more CC. I feel like the amount of support you have in this faction, maybe you won't need a stun set from Sashi, but there is an option. So that's how I would combine my team. I would probably say run 2 supports or maybe 3 supports if your gear's bad. 1 DPS, 1 healer. There's not many healers in the faction outside of Riho, so healing is going to be a little bit of a tricky thing to get around. If you don't have Riho, you're probably going to be looking at a bunch of lifesteal or regen sets. But you know, you can always just kill the enemy before they kill you, so you can probably go more DPS route as well. So that's my opinion on all of these champions. I think they're all great. They look fantastic. Every single one of these champions looks great, so it's going to be fun, you know, finally being able to use these champions, taking them out into the faction crypt and see what we can do with them. But let me know, guys, what you're going to be running. If you're looking forward to the faction crypts, if you're really excited for it like I am to use all these champions, let me know down in the comments. But for now, guys, thanks so much for checking the video out. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.